right? I have a thing that I taped to my monitor here that just says, "Fear is the lack of information. Find the fear." Right? Like, it's all toxicity comes from some concern that something you love is being disrupted or taken away or whatever.
Good morning and welcome to episode 41 of the Sandbox.Space weekly podcast where we talk about the games industry, all the exciting hot topics. My name is Chris. I am your host, as always, joined by Baby Girl. Pumpkin is over there. And every week, of course, we have a special guest. And this week's guest is specialer than the last, as I say. Mike Geig from Unity. How are you doing, Mike?
You know, if I was any better, it'd be illegal.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So I know you're not operating on a lot of sleep, but we're gonna try to squeeze every ounce of juice out of you if we can. So Mike, real fast before we get started, why don't you just let people know a little bit about yourself? You've been working at Unity for about 11 years. You've been involved in a lot of stuff. You're a man of the world.
Yeah. Well, I kind of feel like maybe you just said it all there. So yeah, I've been at Unity about 11 years. I've worked as an indie game dev before that, a university educator. I was a wedding DJ for a period of time.
Nice.
Truck driver at one point. Did all sorts of wacky stuff. 5 weeks I wrote bank mortgage software and hated every moment of that. And I've been at Unity the last 11 years. I run the advocacy team at Unity, which is very akin to developer relations or software evangelism or stuff like that. So a lot of traveling. A lot of internal fighting for the users. So I like to say our team is like Tron. We fight for the users, and that's me. And I've been digging it for a long time.
Awesome. You're also an Ohio native. I think you're still in Ohio.
Yes,
right?
I am.
Awesome. Yeah.
I am. Yeah.
So
low cost of living. Love it.
Yeah, totally. I think we got connected the second year of GDEX, I believe, when it was called the Ohio Game Developer Expo, OGDE.
That's correct.
And that was the first year that we started working with you in Unity. That was back when we did pitch competitions, and Unity would provide Unity Pro licenses for the winners. And a lot of great stories on that. I've talked about BombFest before. BombFest is one of my big success stories, both through GDEX, because BombFest was the winner of the first pitch competition and got the first Unity Pro license.
I remember that one.
Yeah, which Zach then leveraged into. He took a lot of the input and the thoughts that we gave him from the pitch competition, and he molded that into BombFest using that Unity Pro license, which then became his first ship title, which is a game that I think is very well regarded by a lot of people, including myself. So I think that's just, it's an exciting story that I talk about supporting the community and how being out there and being active and engaged can really help to build up that ecosystem, I guess, and help support. And certainly in the indie space, we could certainly use it. So I'm curious, before we get too far, you've worked, I think, predominantly with indie developers as an advocate. I'm curious just, over the past 11 years, how you've seen that space change.
Yeah, it's been interesting because it's been wild because it's required the indie community, as far as I've interacted with, to become much more mature in a business sense, right? It used to be a lot different. I mean, and that's not just indies, that's the whole game industry. It used to just be about making the game. And anymore, it feels like making the game is the easiest part. Making the game's that's the fun part. And then marketing and business decisions and, these things just make it's so much more complicated than it used to be. Like when I worked as an indie game dev, these things weren't stuff I had to worry about or even consider, right? You had an actual game launch and that was it. No more, there wasn't running things as a service and stuff like that. So it's required the indie who was already known for wearing many hats to continue wearing even more hats. That being said, tools have been developed and services and all these things have come out to sort of meet the need of that market so that indies can still thrive and stuff. So it's been a really interesting, time to watch the industry grow and then all these things to grow around it, and it just it's pretty cool. And we're still seeing like great hits. We're still seeing like cool, innovative things. Yeah, I feel like that was a bit of a rambly answer, but it just,
That's all
it's
right.
required more of people than maybe in the past, and yet indies have risen to the challenge. Small, medium-sized businesses have risen to the challenge, and continue to just, knock our socks off with really cool games.
Yeah. Well, don't be afraid about rambling. I ramble all the time. That's what we're here for.
Perfect.
But no, I think it is very on point. I'm running this gaming accelerator. I help foster the GDEX and the game dev community here in Ohio and the Midwest. And I would say regularly, time and time again, it is the business aspects that these indie teams are just not. I mean, I was gonna say you'd be surprised. You personally probably would not be surprised, but our viewers might be surprised just how often I'll sit down with an indie team and I'm like, you guys realize like nobody owns this IP, right? Like you don't even have like, there's no assignment of copyrights here. You guys aren't incorporated. Like this game you've been working on, like you have no idea who actually owns this property. And then they're like, well, what do you mean? I was like, well, let's have a conversation.
Game law, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. And it gets, it does get kind of for someone like me, it gets a little worrisome because I was like, we need to get this under control because you guys are heading into a bad place. But it's not uncommon, and it's not even something that you see between like indie devs and AAA devs. I would say in most cases, I think AAA devs are worse because they're used to being part of a larger team that has an HR person and a lawyer and an accountant and marketing. They're used to having all those kind of things covered by their company. And when they branch off on their own to create a smaller studio, they're just not prepared. They might be kick ass at making a game, but they're not prepared at like all the logistics and operations for being successful as a studio.
Having to do it themselves now. Yeah, 100%. And it's such a weird time too in terms of like funding and things like that. So I was at Nordic Game earlier this year, and for kind of preface, and that's in Malmo, Sweden. Prior to COVID, right, you would see these games would come up with like a sort of an early version of the game, maybe a prototype, whatever, that showed on the floor, and they'd work with publishers who would help them fund them, get them over the finish line, like get them what they need to actually make the game, to get the marketing and all that. And this year, the games there were so fantastic. Like they were like finished, like polished, like amazing games. And every studio there was like, we're just waiting to find a publisher because we need someone to help us market it. Like they didn't even need money to finish the game, which is generally what you go to a publisher for.
Yeah.
They just didn't know how to market the game. And so it's like these games are amazing and they're just sitting there in a not yet release stage because they don't know how to do the marketing side of things. And it's
Totally.
like, that's so different.
Yeah, I do a lot of conversations around publishers, and right now it's both publishing and investing. It is a rough time to get support, and unfortunately, that also makes it a publisher's market where they can be very selective, very picky. Like you said, I mean, I remember. You and I have been in this game a while. Like when Kickstarter first started, and like you could put a Kickstarter up there with like a hope and an idea, and you would get funded. Now you need like pretty much like a functioning demo and like a really nicely produced video. And it's just,
And you still need a marketing campaign.
yeah. And then you still got to do a marketing campaign. And like, I think a lot of people don't realize like a Kickstarter, I always tell people like expect a 3-month, like the campaign, 3 months of full-time work. You need the month before you start the campaign, doing all your priming and your marketing. You need the month during the campaign to grind and get those people converted into sales. And then you need a month afterwards doing your cleanup and all your fulfillment and whatever. I mean, it's a full-time job in and of itself. And it's a lot. It's just a lot, particularly when you don't have any experience or you don't have that skill set. So speaking of business, why don't we jump straight in? I think we got to talk about the gift horse in the mouth down in the well or whatever. So this is this is Unity's page. Unity is canceling the runtime fee effective immediately after extensive consultation with our games community and customers. I assume you've probably been involved in that. We've decided to cancel the runtime fee. So you can read more about this on the Unity blog. I will say what I say with all our guests, which is that even though Mike works for Unity, he's been there for a long time, and he can sort of speak his mind. He's not representing Unity in these conversations, so we're just going to kind of have a conversation. But I don't even remember when the runtime fee was first announced. I'm sure you do. You probably
September 12th, 2023.
Okay, so you've got some PTSD on that one. So we got rid of it. I think that was a smart move. It took a year, but I think better late than never. So I'm kind of curious your thoughts on sort of the whole runtime thing, and maybe whatever you might be allowed to talk about kind of the vibe around it, and where you might think Unity is, kind of where the vibes are at now.
Yeah. Runtime fee was an interesting scenario. It was an attempt to try to find something that was better than like a straight rev share. And to kind of preface a little bit, right? So 2023, changes the way ads work and monetization and things like that, kind of made us as a company say, hey, we need to make our engine profitable. And for folks who don't know, engines are really hard to make profitable. You kind of subsidize them with other things. We did it with ads. Epic does it with like Fortnite and Fall Guys and whatever, right? So, because the engines themselves are really expensive, a lot of engineering, and there's a very slim margin on those things. And so we wanted to get the engine profitable and whatnot. And one of the things from conversations with our bigger, like our more enterprise users and stuff like that, was that, sharing in success was that we should be, right? Because everyone has an interest, a vested interest in making sure that Unity is successful as an engine and is better and all that, because, you've invested in Unity to make games with it. So obviously that makes a lot of sense. So there was a solid reasoning behind it. And, the runtime fee was this kind of idea of, hey, you can either choose to do rev share or runtime fee, whichever will be lower for you and whatnot. That being said, Unity's bad at two things: naming things and announcing things. And that is true across the board. And what ultimately was kind of put out there was it was lacking. There were a lot of edge cases. There was a lot of question marks in terms of, we didn't quite answer questions well. The original kind of suggestions changed last minute. There was just it wasn't putting our best foot forward, right? And we kind of, we scrambled right afterwards to try to find a better way to say it and a better way to change things, and we found something that was okay. And then we went into a whole like, all right, well, let's just stop talking. Let's start talking to our customers. Let's figure out what the path forward is. And we took our time with that, and maybe it should have taken a year or whatever, but it did. Because we obviously didn't want to do another thing and then have that blow up in our face, right? And there was a lot of change of leadership. There was a lot of change of structuring.
Yeah, I was gonna say you had some internal changes, staff changes.
Yeah. Well, and we retooled the company, right? Like, so we figured, hey, if we're not gonna make the engine profitable by bringing in more money through rev share and stuff like that, let's make the company leaner, refocus. Let's get out of these things that maybe we shouldn't have been in and whatnot, and basically just refocus the company on the things that matter, our core game users and all this stuff. And so, we did some restructuring within the company, we did some restructuring within leadership, and then exactly a year later, September 12th, 2024, we announced we're canceling the runtime fee after, again, talking with studios and things like that, where, a majority of the feedback was just charge us more for our licenses and call it a day. So that we don't have to mess with any of that other stuff. And we went, okay, that's fair. At that point, we've made the engine profitable by basically, streamlining the company and what we're doing. And so now we're able to like set a path forward and get back to doing the things that are really cool, back to the things that are like great for the users. And honestly, it feels like a little bit internally, it feels a little bit like the pre-COVID, like people are excited, people are happy, we're getting out there, we're focused on the things that matter. And it's just, it's a great time to be at Unity now, where the last couple of years have been, tough as we've just tried to figure things out. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's great. I remember talking to you a long time ago that I think one of the reasons that Unity was successful in its early days was just how focused it was on getting out in the community, networking with people, making sure that devs felt, particularly like engineers, kind of on the programming side, if they feel like they're like floating in an island by themselves, if, you'd be like, wow, there's documentation. I was like, yeah, but documentation's one thing. Being able to like feel like you're connected to something larger and that there's people there that can have your back when you encounter some kind of weird issue or whatever. And then that was there for many years, and then it kind of floated away for a bit. And I'm glad to see that it's coming back. It's funny you use the what do you say, naming and announcing things. I feel like that's a very like Microsoft kind of problem. I think they're notorious at that. But yeah, constructing that message and make it work. And you mentioned Unreal and Epic. We're going to talk about them a little bit because I think they kind of cheat as well. So was one of the core issues just the monetizing it through the monthly fee? Did you guys feel like you had kind of like capped that and you didn't want to go over it, and so you're trying to find another mechanism to do that?
Well, it was the challenging thing there. Really, are you asking like why it was a big deal to the community, or why we went that, like we're considering that route?
Yeah, I'm saying like you had to have sat around in a smoky room with cigars, right, and thought about like pricing, and you could have been like, well, we could make it $25 or $50 more a month for the pro version or whatever. Why pull the runtime fee one?
So, I mean, I can speak to basically how I understand it, and while I'll never lie to anybody, I reserve the right to be wrong.
Sure,
so,
I don't expect you to know
represent
everything. So,
yeah, exactly. It was we wanted to find a better way in terms of the customers that, because we have a few customers that have like 2 licenses and make like, $100 million and stuff like that. So it's like, all right, let's figure out maybe a better way to share with them, because we end up doing a lot of support for them. We end up doing a lot of like, a lot of our building, towards that.
Gotcha.
But ultimately, and really the whole like just raising the license, a certain percentage instead of something like runtime fee, with the way the company was structured in the past, and again, this is my interpretation of how things have gone, I don't think it would have worked. I think it was through the hard work of restructuring that's what made us lean and focus, that now this is a viable option where in the past it wasn't. So, basically we faced some hard truths, and it was not an easy time or an easy process, right? A lot of folks who I've worked with for a long time ended up leaving and stuff like that. But in the long run, we can now do a more viable option, a healthy option. And to be fair, I think something like a rev share, runtime fee, the biggest problem with that is that it's confusing, right? What is a runtime? What if I don't, what if it doesn't install? What if it's a web game? Like whatever, whatever. And we were just like, well, hey, self-report. And it was just like kind of wink, but it's scary, right? Like, cause you can't say, well, this is what this is going to mean for my company. So that was one of the issues there. But then also like rev share. I think rev share is a great model, right? Why not? The problem, I think, is that by charging a license and rev sharing, it's kind of like double dipping, right? And there's a point where if you don't make enough, you're actually paying more than you would have through just pure rev share or whatever. It was complicated, right? It was confusing, and ultimately the user said, "Hey, we don't want it," and we said, "Okay, well, let's grow an amount of time. Let's talk to a lot of customers," which we talked to a lot of customers and said, all right, well, what does make sense? And this is where we landed. And it kind of sucks we ever went down this route to begin with, right? It was tough, but we learned a lot, and we ultimately were better as a company for it.
Sure.
So, a lot of people are still angry or still like, well, what's stopping Unity from trying again in the future? And it's like, the market showed us what happens when we try something like this. Like we're not going down that path again, man.
Yeah. So I personally, I tend to be, maybe I'm a sap, I don't know. But I tend to, if people look like they're learning their lessons, I think right now, not getting too political, but we see this in politics, I think people just kind of want accountability and an understanding that when something's gone off the rails. If you're willing to own up to it and acknowledge it, I think most people are willing to give folks a second chance. At least that's where I'm coming from. And I see this before. I mean, CD Projekt Red is another one where I enjoyed Cyberpunk when that game came out. I played it at launch when it crashed every 30 minutes on the dot, and it was a hot mess. But I still loved the overall vibe of the game, but it burned a lot of goodwill. And it took them time to kind of rebuild that. There's a comment in the chat here, just how old Unity felt delightfully game focused, which was a nice vibe, and that seems like that's kind of maybe where you're all heading back to. Which I think is great, and I do worry. This is sort of a larger conversation. Is that I'm seeing we're already moving into software as a service, right? We're moving into subscription models. I don't even know, does Unity even offer a lifetime pay once option anymore?
No perpetual license.
Yeah, perpetual license. So we're sort of moving into that space. And I am getting a little worried, not just in the game space, but just in every element of our lives, where like everything's going to require an ongoing fee. And then like, it's like, is my hammer going to charge me every time I nail a nail? Like, is this the world we're living in or whatever? That does worry me slightly.
It does. I personally, I hate subscriptions. You know, my printer was like, subscribe to your ink. And I'm like, okay.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely not. Like the smart TVs and that, like, man, I absolutely hate it. And in my, my personal life, I subscribe to a couple like TV services, but even then, I feel sick every time I do, because like, hey, this thing I want to watch, I'm paying for these services, and yet there's no way to watch it without stealing it. And it's just like, okay, this is getting to be absolutely ridiculous. So I don't know. It feels like everyone forgot that there's a limited amount to this pie, and everyone's like, I'm gonna have my own subscription. It's like, no, man, like,
sure,
no.
Yeah, and also, to your point, I think video games are very interesting, mainly because it's easy to steal stuff in the digital world, as opposed to it's way easier to steal Baldur's Gate 3 than it is like a Mercedes. Well, maybe not. I don't know. I've never stolen a car before. Maybe it's easier, but I assume it's harder. But I also think that we kind of do it to ourselves a lot. Like when we make the process more difficult for just regular consumers to engage with your product or service, then it incentivizes people. It's not always, I think people think theft is about the money, and sometimes it is. I think a lot of times like it's just about convenience and annoyance, and like I don't want to have to log on to Ubisoft's system every time I play a game or whatever, But that's
absolutely. It's a little bit to a point where it becomes like well, screw you, I'm not doing that. And I think people have forgotten along the way that the secret to success with subscriptions, or the games where you have the game passes and stuff, is that you have to offer the value that makes me say I want to give you this money to get this thing, not I have to give you this money before I can enjoy any base amount of this. And that's where things get, like now it just feels like it's just a painful process. And it's like we even see like games that have ads in them, right? Like,
sure,
the ads are significantly more successful if they're just part of the game loop and you're rewarded for it, as opposed to like, no, I'm just going to show you an ad. Like if a game does that to me, I just uninstall it immediately. Like if you show me an ad I didn't ask for, nope, we're done.
Wordle just added ads like 4 days ago or something, and I looked at it and like, oh man, did I do my Wordle yesterday? Let me see. I might have missed my Wordle. But yeah,
did you lose your streak?
I think I did.
I
did. Damn. That's the other thing about Wordle. I wish you could jump back like a day, like if you just forget one or you get sick or whatever. It seems too harsh. Anyway, we can talk about Wordle another time. So I want to, while we're kind of on this, I do want to bring up, so this is an article. This is from IGN by Wesley Yin-Poole. After laying off 830 employees, Tim Sweeney says Fortnite maker Epic is now financially sound. September, blah, blah, blah. North Carolina studio behind Fortnite and Unreal Engine suffered a significant round of layoffs and saw 830 employees, about 16% of its workforce, lose their jobs. So even in the world of Fortnite and whatnot, it's a rough place, and
Yeah.
that's with Fortnite. I mean, making a tremendous amount of money, so it's easier to bring out your own store or run your own game engine when you have another giant source of revenue that can
Yep.
bolster that up, which I know is something that like Unity has tried diversifying their offerings and their services and whatnot. But I mean, let's be honest, like falling into a Fortnite like is kind of dumb luck, right? Like to fall into something that successful. Yeah, you got to set the
Yeah.
pieces in place to be successful, but they didn't know Fortnite was going to be what it was before it
No, I
became
mean
what it
no,
is.
but they have a great track record. I mean, I like to say that
Sure.
they're a game company that happens to have an engine, like, and it's true. Like, and that makes their stuff very battle tested. I believe the layoffs were actually from the Fall Guys folks, like, because they acquired that studio, which was originally made with Unity. They acquired the studio, reproduced it in Epic, and I just don't think it was performing the way they wanted. So the layoffs were primarily those folks. I could be wrong, but I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, that's a large part there. And I remember very mixed emotions when that happened, because obviously you don't want to see the layoffs. You don't want to see this stuff in the industry. It's tough. But it did happen a few weeks after the runtime fee. And what I guess the positive thing, at least from my perspective, is it changed the dialogue from look how greedy Unity's being to, oh man, it's really hard to make game engines because both Unity and Epic are having those trouble finding ways to make their engines profitable, because it's expensive. It's just crazy expensive.
Yeah.
And you look at the fees for now using the engines being so small, and then you look at like the platforms themselves take 30% off the top, right? Just right then and there.
Yep.
And then you're like, okay, so, but then you look at this license or this rev share model and you go, well, no way. And that's like 5% off the bottom and stuff like that. And people are like, absolutely not. It's crazy. It's like back when you wouldn't pay $1 for a mobile game, but you'd buy a $5 coffee, and but it's like a
I don't know
dollar
what
for
you're
a
talking about,
game. Are
Mike.
you insane? Exactly, right? So it's a very different way of looking at it. It's a different
Yeah.
standard and stuff like that. But yeah, the layoffs there truly unfortunate. And we saw them at Microsoft, and we saw them all over the place because, yeah, it's just it's a tough time in tech right now. But the silver lining, or maybe the light at the end of the tunnel, is that these things happen at a cycle and it'll bounce back, right? Every disruptive tech that comes out does this to the industry. This happened with blockchain. This happened with cloud. This happened with the VR stuff in 2017. Where all the funding goes into those buzzwordy things for a period of time. It's happening with AI right
Yeah,
now.
we're in
And
AI.
then things normalize, bounce back, and the industry grows again, right? It's very common in tech.
Yeah. I don't think I've done an episode of this show where we haven't talked about layoffs at least once, and this is episode 41. So
Yeah.
it's been a rough, and I've mentioned before we were working on a AAA project at sort of the beginning, so that it would have been March, April-ish of last year.
Hmm.
And when the sort of floodgates opened and our project got canceled, and then more projects kept getting canceled, and it is a rough time to be in there. And I think too, just for two old fogies like us, it's easy to forget that when Unity came on the scene, I remember Unity was at like 3.0. We were doing a lot of cool stuff in that, but like that was the only kind of indie option. Like,
Hmm.
Unreal existed, but if you wanted a license for that, it could be two, three, four
Really
hundred thousand
expensive.
dollars.
Yeah.
And then remember CryEngine? We were looking at
Oh
that
yeah.
for a while, and the licensing for that was 300,000 euros when we were talking to them, and just a price point that's just completely out of the hands
Yeah.
of an indie developer. And so the Unity coming in, and then obviously Unreal took note that you guys had created a market, really, and then Unreal came in. But having those two options change the way that games are made, like
Yeah.
foundationally. And I think that
Completely.
we should at least sort of remember and acknowledge that, because I don't think we would see. It's not even I don't think we would not see a lot of the titles that people have fallen in love with over the past decade if these tools were
Yeah.
not available.
I remember back before WYSIWYG, editors of games were a thing, where you'd write your code, then compile it and run it to see the changes and stuff, and it was
Yeah.
wild. But I would point out too that so the Unity goal was always the democratizing of game development, right? Like making it available to everybody. And when Cry went free, and when Epic launched Unreal 4 with it, which like its big relaunch, and everyone's like, oh my God, now it's very similar model. It was, I think at the time it was like $20 a month, and then maybe a rev share, and then they eventually got rid of the $20 a month or whatever. Like at Unity, we were actually really like excited. Like it was like mission accomplished, right? These giants changed their business model to match it, which was really cool. But
Sure.
ultimately led us down the path that brought us to some of the changes last year and the riff or the runtime fee and stuff like that, because it was like, the hero that goes out and slays the dragon, then comes home and goes, well, now what? And that put us into our sophomore album kind of phase where we're just trying to figure out who are we now and what's our
Yeah.
new mission. And I think we got into a little bit of a try to be everything to everyone, which is just not possible. So it's, from the greatest successes come failures, but then hopefully,
Sure.
if you persevere, it leads more successes. And so, but yeah, the whole, man, I was an Unreal dev years ago before joining Unity and stuff like that, and I worked on some titles with Unreal 3, and the pricing of it, and it was just without competition, things were just, they weren't great. Like even Unity in those days when Epic went to Unreal 4, Unity was kind of fat and lazy. We were like, we have the indies, we kind of slowed down on things, and then it's like, oh, we've got real competition now. We've got to get back to things and start hitting it hard. So
Yeah.
it's cool to see that evolution.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the story's been interesting because I think at a high level here, and I'm not throwing shade in any direction, but for a while it was like Unity kind of needed to catch up with the graphics and power of what Unreal could do. But by the other side of the coin, Unreal needed to become more accessible because it wasn't built for a mass audience adoption. And a lot of the early particularly some of the early pre-releases for the general audience, Unreal was just, I don't want to say unusable, but like it didn't have very good documentation. There was no community around it on the indie side because nobody could afford, the licensing fees before that. So there was a period too where Unreal kind of had to get its crap together and sort of match the level of accessibility and openness that you guys had at Unity, while you were then trying to sort of match some of the more AAA level, graphical abilities.
Yeah.
And I think
it was always fun. Go ahead.
I was just saying, I think overall, particularly with Unity 6, which is released I think October 18th, plug for GDEX,
17th.
Or 17th. Okay, pardon me.
Yeah.
But come Unity, we've got GDEX, we've got Unity coming out, and they're going to do a couple talks on Dev Day, one of which is going to be a really kind of deep dive into Unity 6 and looking at a specific game and how it was made there. So I'll just do a little plug for thegdex.com. But you're starting to
It's a great
see
event, by the way, for the folks here who've not attended. I've been honored to be, visit it as much as I can over the last years, and it's a really good event. I go to a lot of them.
We're trying, man. We're trying. Us in little old Columbus, Ohio here, but yeah, I'm seeing the two engines are kind of hitting a sort of level of parity where they're more accessible for sort of a general audience, in particular a student audience. I think is a big one. Yeah. Students and hobbyists trying to get that door in there. But you were going to say something.
Man, I don't know. Oh, yeah, it's mostly just an anecdote, and I don't want to derail too much. But, there's what we call the perception gap, right? Where everyone's just like, well, the Epic games or Unreal games just look better and they can do more graphic-wise and stuff like that. And certainly there are features that they have that we don't. There's features that we have that they don't and stuff like that. And they're kind of two different approaches. But a lot of this was fueled a little bit by how, open our market was and how, if you paid money, you could create a game with Unity and not have our splash screen on it. So all the really good games made with Unity, you didn't know were made with Unity, but all the kind of the cheaper games or the maybe not great games had our label on it. And kind of the opposite with Epic, where you had to be like a high quality game to get their logo on it. So there's this whole perception thing. But I remember last year, the year before, when they opened up the Epic Store so that anyone could post their games on it. It didn't have to be just curated games. Anyone could post their games to the Epic Store. And I remember being mused because I went to the Epic Store page and it was just flooded with all these really crappy looking games, just like these really stupid whatever. And I'm like, see, like you can make ugly games with Unreal too.
Oh, sure.
It's yeah, it's just kind of like that. Now they get to experience some of the perception stuff that we've dealt with, where it's just like when you allow everyone to make games, which I'm a big fan of, and I make programmer art, so my games always look terrible. You allow everyone to make games, then of course it's not going to be curated like every game looks amazing, and you start to see the realities are that it, no matter what engine you use or what tech you use, making a great looking game is really really challenging, no matter what. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. And I think that that is we've talked about a couple of these things in the past where I think that's a great example of sort of the halo effect that has occurred because of Unity and Unreal, where now you have things like the Unity Asset Store, and you have people that are I won't say cheap, we'll say affordable, that you can find online that can help create assets or work within those platforms because now they're so ubiquitous. Whereas 10 years ago, 12 years ago, you'd have to find somebody to do it, or you'd have to learn how to do it yourself, which to your point, if a programmer is learning how to make 3D models, they probably ain't going to be that great looking. But now there's just the availability. I think the Unity Asset Store was a great idea. And now there's just the amount of free content that you can get on the Unity Asset Store. And if you're doing a game jam, or you're doing a demo, or even if you're doing a full-fledged commercial release, that's just, it's just huge. And maybe there's a kind of a case of sameness because a lot of people are using similar assets, but I'd rather have that than have people not be able to kind of realize their vision and get it out there. So I think that's a really cool part. But one of the questions that we talked about last week with Adam from IGN was about discoverability, and you kind of are hitting on that, whether it's through Steam or Unreal or PlayStation or whatever, just being able to discover those good games. You use the word curated multiple times. Like we say GDEX is a curated show, so we look through the applications and we choose people. And we obviously offer our indie section for people that are creating games that maybe aren't quite as polished, we'll say, or whatever. But there's so much content being created now. Like, how do we curate this stuff? How do we bring good stuff to the front without it kind of being this weird, I don't know, advertising ad space kind of thing?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I don't think you do, right? I think at least the pattern I see, right, and what feels maybe is like the natural order of things is that, you have the marketing machine that's always dominated by the AAAs or the folks with all the marketing budget, and indies struggle to be seen there, or the games without a huge marketing budget, or the more interesting titles that maybe don't look good, but actually once you play them, you're like, oh my God, this is amazing, and stuff like that. But then what always comes about is this sort of guerrilla marketing, right, where people figure out new ways to market that's not part of the marketing machine. That's your Kickstarter, right? That was Twitch streaming. That was YouTube YouTube live devlogs. That was, right? And every time someone figures out, one of these new guerrilla marketing things, this grassroots organic marketing thing that works really well, then it starts the countdown. And the countdown is until that thing gets absorbed into the marketing machine. And now you have to pay people lots of money on Twitch, to the streamers. You have to pay YouTubers to play your game. That used to all be free because it's what they did and it was fun. And eventually it got turned into influencers and stuff like that. So once that happens, then some new platform comes about, some new way happens, right? And that becomes the new guerrilla marketing. And then again, someone's going to find success in that. And then the countdown begins again until that gets absorbed into the marketing machine. And then the next thing has to happen, right? Like, so Instagram was it, and now it's TikTok. And eventually TikTok is going to become the same as everything else. And then there's going to be some new thing, because while you're trying to find novel ways to market your game, these platforms are trying to find ways to stand out against other platforms, the social medias, the video channels, or whatever. So they're looking to disrupt, media sharing and communication and social media and stuff, just like you're trying to disrupt marketing and find grassroots and organic. So if you're going that route, if you don't have the big marketing budget, if you don't have that AAA budget to become one of the curated things, if you don't get that lightning in the bottle, like your Flappy Bird that just sort of happens to get picked up and turned insane because of some news article or whatever, if you're not one of them, right, then you have to find the guerrilla ways. And so when you're like, how do you get these things curated? I don't think you do. I think this is how these. I think the
This is
reality
just
is like
life now.
this is capitalism, right? Steam has an obligation to put things in their list that's going to sell. It's going to make them money. They're not trying to like bring you avant-garde titles that you may have missed. They're trying to make money, right? And so all curated lists are curated by people that are just like, I bet you if I show you these things, you're going to buy them. And if there's a game on here that I don't think you'll buy, I won't put it on here. So it's less about what you do. You really are quite passive in all that. And now the active role is saying, well, how do I stand out when I'm not on a curated list? What new ways can I have to stand out? What's my interesting mechanic? What's my interesting whatever, right? And
Yeah.
everyone has to find that.
Well, that's a little depressing, but thank you, Mike.
But no, I mean, but it sounds depressing, but it's actually not because because like I said before, we're still seeing amazing titles. We're still seeing a lot of
Sure.
people are finding the way, right? And it's actually cool and interesting, and it actually builds careers and builds people up. Like the idea of a Twitch influencer, you know, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 10 years ago was like never even imaginable. And now new markets are created, and yet games churn on. It's not like the market's dying, it's growing. So even though this sounds like oh man, this is depressing, dystopian, I'm not going to get on these lists. No, it the will of the industry moves forward, and it's really cool because this industry is defined by smart people who don't listen to when people tell you you can't do a thing.
I get that. I totally get that.
Yeah.
I guess my sort of concern, and maybe I'm just a little more cynical, it sort of comes in two shades. The first is it goes back to what we were talking about before, where you have a group of people that might be able to make a kick-ass game. They just don't know how to market it, and they may not have the money to market it. And so, yes, new avenues for them are being kind of created. And I guess the answer is they have to step up their game and figure out how to do those things. My worry is just like you might have a lot of just great people that are super good at something. And then the second part is always it comes back to the algorithm, right? Like everything is always tied to the algorithm. And if the algorithm's main and only goal is to put things in front of you at which will make money, okay. But I don't think it's going to be presenting you with a lot of things. And I point this out. I think I'm an algorithm's worst nightmare because like literally everything that YouTube shows me or Facebook shows me or whatever is like, I don't care. I don't want it. I don't need it. I'm not interested in it. I think probably less than 5% of the stuff I'm shown on social media is even something I'm even remotely interested in looking at. Maybe that's just me.
Yeah.
And so I feel like the algorithm, it's sort of like, art imitates life, but like we kind of are constructed by what's shown to us and we don't have any control over what's shown to us. And yet that is creating our perception of the world. And one of the reasons why I kind of come around to this is like, I had a conversation with my students a couple weeks ago where one of them was just like, oh, there's no good games or whatever. And I was like, I stopped the class, the slides. And I was like, I'm going to say this is that I really kind of want you guys, and I don't mean anything negative by this, but I want you guys to pull your heads out of your ass because this is literally the best time to be a gamer in the history of games. There are so many amazing games. We have like the technology is doing stuff that like we can only dream about in the 90s. You've got backwards compatibility. You've got Steam. I mean, there is no better time right now to play a game. Yeah, you have to shift through a lot of crap and you kind of have to find it. And maybe that's where these influencers or these YouTubers that you kind of like gel with come into play. So in that regard, I think this is an amazing time to be a gamer. My thought is creating sustainable game dev businesses.
Yeah.
What are the legs that we need to build to make sure that is possible?
Sure. So, I mean, when has game dev as a career choice ever been the stable option ever? Like, there was never that golden period of of,
Yeah.
all these studios find success. It's always been crunch and feast and famine and ebb and flow, and you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
this fluctuation, that's not new.
Yeah, and I think that
And
has just
yeah,
real fast. I think that has a lot to
yeah,
do
yeah.
with I've talked on the show and the students that games have come about. I consider games an art form. I consider video games to be an art form, but it's one of the
Yep.
few art forms, if sort of any, that has its creation coincided directly with consumerism. Like music was not that way. The written word was not that way. Plays were not that way. Like we had tens of thousands of years of people creating artwork before we realized that, like, oh, we can make money off of this. That's not how. From the second video games existed, we were throwing them in arcades. We were trying to find ways to monetize them, and so I think those two. I mean, I don't think they can be untwined at this point.
Well, they're an interesting crossroads as well, because it's the first, in my opinion, the first time that you have a technical art, you know, industry. I'll say that because it's art, but it also requires technology, right? It's a
Sure.
technical art industry where the creators are the consumers as well. Game makers play games. Now, you could say the same for music. People that make music listen to music, but there you add that third element of being a programmer, or being a technical artist, shaders, creation, or whatever.
Yeah.
That's what makes it new and interesting, right? Musicians, they're technical in terms of instruments, but like when I'm talking like writing code and stuff like that, it's not, well, like I said, I wrote mortgage software for 5 weeks. It's not like I wrote mortgage software all day, then went home and checked out, check
Yeah.
out Rocket Mortgage's website, right? This is so, no, like this is the one avenue in technology where the users are the consumers as well. And it creates very interesting contrast that pushes forward. And it is a great time to be a consumer. It's a scary time to be a game creator only because things are changing rapidly. But to me, I think the biggest thing, and I say this to the students when I talk to them, I say this to the smaller companies when I talk to them, the best thing you can do is sit down early and really understand what success means to you. Because a lot of times people have it in their head, like you see the Flappy Birds, you see the whatever, just like you see the pop musicians or whatever, where I'm going to create this thing and it's going to immediately make me a millionaire and I'm going to change the world. And sometimes the reality is success is just making your pay, like you make games and you have a decent success, right? Like it's a modest success where you keeps
Sure.
the doors open, keeps you making what you love. It's not going to like put you in early retirement and stuff like that, but that's the majority, and it always has been, of people. Or you even make games and you supplement with non-gaming like interactive software and things like that, and
Yeah.
like say architectural engineering or whatever. um
I have
so
this
yeah,
story
yeah,
I tell all the
yeah.
time because we've been doing multivarious since 2012,
Hmm.
and just being honest, I say this all the time. Like, I feel like a failure way more often than I feel like a success in this game. I feel like I'm constantly struggling to keep this business going, to do things like GDEX. We don't make any money at GDEX. Like, the amount of time we put into it's just, but we do it because we love it and we think it's important for the community and it provides opportunities. I do it a lot because, one, I get to meet people. I get to meet all my friends that come in, but I get to also use it as an excuse to pull in folks that I've admired or liked from the games industry who ordinarily would not be coming to Columbus, Ohio for any other reason. And so for
Yeah.
me, I kind of get to meet a lot. Like, I get to meet Jonathan Blow and Grant Kirkhope and, people like that. And so that's really exciting for me. But I was watching TV one day with my friend, and we were watching Bob's Burgers. And Bob's always like hard on himself, and the world's always beating Bob down, and he's just trying to make it through the day. And somebody mentioned to him, like, they were talking about success or whatever, and he had that sort of same feeling where Bob doesn't feel like he's successful. He feels like he's constantly struggling. And it sort of stuck with me. And I was just like, my friend Jeremy, I was watching, I was like, how long's this show been around? Like, what season is this? And it was like season 12 or 13 or whatever. And I was like, you know what? Like, I think if you can run a business for 12 or 13 years, you cover your costs, you can provide a home for your children, you can give them an education. That kind of feels like a success to me,
Yeah. I mean, my dad created and ran for 40 years an appliance repair business. I worked there for 6 years, and he was constantly feeling like, it shouldn't be this hard. I'm like successful, or whatever. But he did this job. It paid the bills. I raised 3 kids on us for 40 years. Like, and just by reevaluating what success means to you,
Yeah.
I think you can find a lot more happiness, because what is that? The Buddhist principle of unhappiness is the delta between expectation and reality.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just have to understand what are you actually going for, and then are you doing anything to help you get there? Because it is a tough industry, but not tougher than any other self-starter industry, right? And I think a lot of times it's just about having that understanding, that reality. I even see folks in the chat here saying, the goal is to just pay your bills with this thing and stuff like that, and it's doable, right? It's
Oh, sure.
if I had to go and start a new business these days, right? Like, that would also be blood, sweat, and tears, regardless of the industry. So, yeah, it is tough, right? Especially because people view it as a privilege to be in this industry. Is it a privilege? I mean, I don't know. It feels like it some days, but most days you're like, it's just software, man. It's just software that happens to be fun to use.
Yeah, I do kind of consider it a privilege a little bit, because I think that despite all of the nonsense, I think that we as an industry have more or less been able to maintain the products as an art form, and we consider them like, the pushback we've gotten on things around DLCs and expansions and horse armor and whatever. Like, there have been lots of companies that have tried to push the boundaries of sort of this Skinner box gambling style of generating revenue that we as an industry have kind of managed to push back on. I don't know how long that bulwark will last, but at least for now, I think we've managed to do it. And then I would think, sort of on a more maybe kind of positive note, the thing I really like about our industry is how communal and supportive we are of each other in general. I've worked in a lot of other industries. I mentioned the film industry and others, where it's like, my contacts are mine, and I'm not going to connect you to somebody unless it's a transact. Like, I'm not connecting you to Mike Geig unless I'm going to get something out of you, right? Yeah. And in general, I have found throughout both the software development side and the GDEX side that if I connect to somebody and they know somebody, I was like, oh, would you mind doing an email intro, a warm introduction for me? 99.9% of the time, they're like, yep, and they'll do it. Like, we share contacts, we support people. I've mentioned this before, but Unity is a sponsor of GDEX this year. I'm super appreciative of that, because that literally is how we can run these shows. Xbox is a sponsor this year again, and so like, we're getting nice. Larger companies in. I think I think people are getting past COVID. People want to be out and doing things again. Yeah. But just to be able to like ring somebody up like you and be like, hey man, you want to be on my show? And you're like, yeah, that sounds great. Like, not all industries are like that. And I think that's something really that we have cultivated and we should be proud of. And I think there is a responsibility in some ways to maintain that sort of level of collegiate professionalism.
I think like, you look at the automotive industry, where if any one of them is attending a tech event, they'll like create fake name badges, so people don't even know where they're from or what their names actually are, because they can't risk their secrets leaking or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. In industries that have found some semblance of stability, at that point you have something to lose because they're very risk averse. But our industry, the game industry, is kind of defined by risk management, like bringing risk on, because it's a risky business. So it's not risky it's actually more of the opposite. It's a safety net at that point to be more community oriented, and it's the real way of like growth and stuff like that. So it's very interesting that you have these long standing industries that are so established, that won't take on risk, and we're just like, yeah, what the hell, like, sure, more the merrier, whatever. Yeah. Because we're all fighting the same fight, and we all realize that there's enough to go around, truly. Yeah. And
it's especially
just continues to grow.
I'd say it's especially noticeable when we get these kind of large layoffs too. It's like you see a lot of people band together on LinkedIn, and they'll create lists of people who got let go, and so companies can kind of go in and find it. So there's just that sort of general sense. And then, not tooting our horn too much, but like when it comes to GDEX, like, I'm more than happy to if a game is coming out, it's going to be released, I'll use our social media and our mechanisms to help promote it. I'll let people know about games that are being made in Ohio and in the Midwest, because I want to see them be successful, and I want those wins. Plus, like, just there's gonna be a lot of kick-ass games in GDEX this year. There's a couple I've already looked at and played. I'm just like, oh my god, I can't wait for your
Well, and I think
next version.
the community mindedness of GDEX is one of the reasons that it's still around, and it's becoming more successful. I mean, you see a lot of these conferences, the first annual, the second annual, and then they disappear, right? And they're more about like this, we're just going to bring experts and they're going to talk to you and kind of thing. And I feel like GDEX has always felt a lot more like a community gathering. And sure, there's the expert talks and stuff like that, but it's that focus on bringing people together instead of this one-way communication that's what has, in my mind, has made it sustain, right? Especially in being in the Midwest region where everyone sort of has to stick together anyway. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of the thing that defines the industry, and it's what makes it so cool to be a part of. It also makes it super toxic, because toxicity just comes from fear, right? Worry that someone's going to disrupt this thing that you love, or that you're not being valued, you're not being heard. You know, all toxicity comes from a good place. As silly as that seems, it's true. Yeah. It does. It truly does. Like, most of the time when someone's like really, really being a troll and stuff like that, I'm like, cool, man, here's my phone number, call me. And rarely do they, and usually that's enough to get them to stop. And sometimes they'll call me and we'll talk for like an hour, and they're just like, yep, actually, this is great. They're worried, right? I have a thing that I taped to my monitor here that just says, fear is the lack of information, find the fear, right? Like, it's all toxicity comes from some concern that something you love is being disrupted or taken away or whatever. And you know, it's a sign of just, you don't see a lot of people in the car industry being toxic on forums and stuff like that. You don't see, you know, that doesn't happen. It happens here because people are passionate, they care.
Yeah, I agree. I also think that by its very nature, the games industry, the users in that industry are also a lot more tech savvy than maybe the average car consumer. And so we're in those places, we're on those forums, we understand how to use those technologies. And yeah, well, man, we're kind of getting to the end here. I've really enjoyed the conversation. I wish we could chat more, Absolutely. But both of us have, we've got our calls that we need to do here. So before we head off, is there any place that people can meet you or follow you if they want to kind of keep on tabs of what you're doing or connect to you?
Absolutely. I mean, so I'm on LinkedIn. It's just Mike Geig. I'm on Twitter as Mike Geig. My email at Unity is mike@unity.com. So you can email me, whatever.
So it's not just a clever name.
That's not just, you know, so my family invented the last name Geig when they moved to America a couple, like 100 years or so ago. Okay. So we're the only Geigs in the world. So I'm literally the only Mike Geig in existence. Okay. And if you Google my name, every result is me. So I just use Mike Geig as my username for everything because there are literally none other ones. Nice. Now trolls are going to go out there and just start registering Mike Geig on a bunch of things.
Well, I'll just say,
on any platform, search Mike Geig. That's me.
It was an honor to have the Mike Geig on the show today. So thank you. So that has been episode 41 of the Sandbox.Space weekly podcast. It's in the books. Yes, it is. Of course, we do our email every week on Wednesdays, where we'll include a link to this podcast as well as the articles that we talked about today. Reminder that GDEX is right around the corner, so you can go to thegdex.com or follow us at thegdex. Also, we are doing 3 community streams, the first one being tonight at 5:30 Eastern. We'll be broadcasting on twitch.tv/thegdex. So we're just doing a community stream. We're going to let folks know what we got coming to GDEX and then open it up for questions and just sort of spend an hour chatting and whatnot. So feel free to join those. If you go to our social medias, you can see the schedule of when we're going to do the 3 sessions. But yeah, that has been a great conversation. Mike, thank you again for being on the show.
Always happy to help.
Awesome. So on behalf of myself, Baby, Pumpkin, everyone in chat, and of course our special guest, Mike, I want to thank you, and we will see you next week.